Imagine this with me for a second. You step outside. It's dawn, but the light is weird. It's filtered, sort of diffused by this really thick, high canopy, unlike anything we have today. And you feel the ground vibrate, a slow, deep, seismic kind of thrum. It's not a truck or a train. It's something purely anciently alive and just massive.
And the air itself is different. It's thick, it's warm, it's humid, and it has this sharp, almost medicinal smell to it.
Like what? Like pine?
Yeah, like wet leaves and resin, but mingled with something else, something musky and earthy. The silence isn't really silent, you know, it's more of a deep, rolling soundscape. The calls you're hearing are throatier, deeper. They're using these ultra-low frequencies that just communicate sheer scale.
That sheer physical scale, that's the key right there, isn't it? You look up and you see shadows moving over the canopy where no skyscraper should be. That vibration, that massive slow exhale you hear somewhere just past the tree line, that is the immediate raw reality of a world that never hit the reset button 66 million years ago.
Precisely. And that's our deep dive today. We're charting this hypothetical scenario where the foundational catastrophe of modern life just didn't happen.
No asteroid.
No asteroid impact, no KT boundary reset, no sudden extinction pulse that wiped out all the megafauna and, well, handed evolutionary dominance to the mammals that survived.
So no clean break between the Mesozoic and the Cenozoic.
Yeah.
Life never just handed the keys to us. Instead, evolution just kept negotiating.
Exactly. Tooth by tooth, claw by claw, generation by generation. It's this constant negotiation over who gets to dominate the surface of the Earth.
And the negotiation, as we found in the source material we've been looking at, was not going in our favor. Not at all.
We've got some just fascinating, highly detailed speculative sources, and they outline what this kind of continued pressure would mean for our species. Our mission for you today is to really get a handle on how human civilization, our culture, our biology even, would be fundamentally reshaped.
Reshaped by existing not as rulers, but as just another specialized species on a dinosaur-dominated planet.
Exactly. We're charting a world defined by avoidance, not by expansion.
What does human history even look like when the single most critical thing you need to know every single morning is just where not to go?
And the initial shock factor here, and this is crucial for you, the listener, to grasp, is that we have to discard the safe museum image of a dinosaur.
Right, they're not just bones under glass.
Not at all. They are, as the sources define them, infrastructure-level forces.
Infrastructure-level forces.
Whoa.
Okay, that sounds terrifying. Let's unpack that. It sounds like something permanent, something overwhelming. Like, are we talking like gravity or tectonic plates?
It's close, but it's more localized and immediate. Think of them like a weather pattern or a permanent geological feature, but it moves.
A moving mountain range.
In a way, yeah. Their sheer mass and their routine movement would carve permanent corridors through the environment. A migration path of, say, massive sauropods doesn't just pass through. The combined weight of that herd could compact the soil enough to literally change the water table. Yeah, causing seismic ripples you could detect miles away.
So they're dictating the hydrology. They're changing where water collects and flows just by walking. Yeah. So they're literal geological engineers, but on a biome level.
Exactly that. The movement of these massive herbivores, driven by just, metabolic necessity, it dictates where major forests can thrive, where ancient rivers flow, and where huge stretches of land are just perpetually cleared and unstable. Their presence is the foundation that all of their life has to build on.
And that, critically, means that any human settlement, any city, if you could even call it that, would have to prioritize concealment and avoidance above absolutely everything else.
Right.
Building a major population center isn't about getting access to a river for transport. It's about optimizing for invisibility.
It's a radical inversion of our entire history. Everything we know about early civilization settlements on open plains, large-scale irrigation, massive visible projects, it's all predicated on the absence of this level of continuous, crushing physical threat.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because as thrilling as it is to imagine this world, the reality for early humans, as our sources really emphasize, would be defined by just unrelenting, clarifying fear. So we have to start with the psychological baseline. Our earliest ancestors, these small, fragile mammals, they already lived under dinosaur rule for, what, 160 million years during the Mesozoic?
Right. That's a long time to be on the menu.
It is.
Yeah.
And that experience shaped everything about them.
Yeah.
Their size, their metabolism, their agility, and above all, their ability to stay unnoticed.
And in this timeline, that pressure never lets up. That fear never disappears. It doesn't get filed away as some kind of psychological artifact like a phobia. It becomes clarity.
Yes.
It's the purest, fastest form of high-speed information processing there is. Our sources suggest that humanity could never have risen in the way we did. The selective pressure against a fragile bipedal creature, even one with a growing brain, would just be astronomically high. We're simply too high energy, too visible, and way too slow compared to everything else.
Which means intelligence would still evolve, of course. But the kind of intelligence would be fundamentally different from ours. Our whole trajectory was defined by this curiosity-driven, abstract, outward-looking exploration. You know, what's over that mountain? Can we master this river?
Theirs would be the ultimate conservative intelligence. It would be hyper-focused, highly risk-averse. The penalty for making a mistake is always extinction.
Always.
So survival constantly rewards caution over exploration and data processing over, say, hypothesis generation.
So the smart early human isn't the one who climbs the ridge to see what's on the other side. It's the one who stays hidden, who tracks the subtle movement of a massive shadow across that ridge, and who records that data point with perfect accuracy. That's a huge shift. Does that mean they would struggle with abstract stuff like math or philosophy, things that need intellectual freedom?
It doesn't mean they'd lack the capacity, but their prioritization would be absolute. Their genius is applied, it's immediate, it's situational. Abstract thought might emerge, sure, but it would always be secondary to predicting the behavior of a local apex predator. They would prioritize ethology, the study of animal behavior, over every single other form of knowledge.
Okay, Kate, setting intelligence aside for a moment, we did have one great equalizer.
Yeah.
One piece of tech that was transformative no matter what: fire.
Fire, in this world, is humanity's first true strategic weapon. It's our first piece of viable infrastructure. And it's not primarily a tool for comfort or for cooking, though those are nice benefits.
No, here, fire is a massive visible deterrent. It's a temporary wall. It's the only thing that creates a predictable boundary.
Flames, smoke, and very carefully controlled burns, that's the line of demarcation. That is what marks the boundary between ours and theirs. It defines this crucial perimeter of safety in a world where a physical fence or a wall means absolutely nothing against raw tonnage.
But even that strategy is super complicated, right? Because early humans would need to learn fast which specific dinosaur species respected fire and which ones just ignored it.
And this is where that risk-averse intelligence gets put to the ultimate test.
So walk us through that. What's the logistical difference? What does it mean for your survival if you misjudge a species' response to a wall of fire?
It means immediate death. A large, flighty coelurosaur might be instinctively terrified of the heat and light, and it'll back away. You can rely on that.
Okay.
But a slow, heavily armored ankylosaur relative whose hide is, massive and doesn't have a lot of nerve endings, it might just trample a controlled burn without even registering the pain.
Oh, well.
Or worse. A specific species of predatory dromaeosaur might have learned over time that the edge of a fire ring is where you find easy, panicked prey.
So that knowledge, more than strength, more than a better weapon even, that becomes the defining survival trait. Understanding the specific physiological and behavioral responses of your local ecosystem is literally the key to existing for your clan.
Yes, understanding their habits, their migration patterns, the frequencies of their territorial calls, the specific way they walk that indicates fatigue or if they're hunting. This ethology would matter infinitely more than inventing a better spear. It's pure, life or death, applied data collection.
And this need for perfectly accurate, critical data, it has to fundamentally shape your society. Because the predators set the rules, and the rules are brutal. Large carnivores wouldn't necessarily hunt humans as a primary food source. We're small, agile, not really worth the energy return compared to taking down, say, a massive, slow, juvenile herbivore.
Right, but accidental encounters, a stray predator moving through a territory or a juvenile just learning to hunt, those single, unpredictable events could wipe out an entire clan. A wrong turn, a moment of carelessness means your entire genetic line is just erased.
So this constant existential threat forces human societies to become these incredibly tightly bound, focused groups. You have to prioritize social cohesion over individual ambition. You can't afford stragglers, you can't afford arguments, you can't afford wasted effort. Everyone has to be focused all the time on collective survival.
And that leads to this crucial detail about culture and memory. Oral history wouldn't be a tradition or a comforting story, or just an interesting cultural artifact.
It would be a literal, functioning, constantly peer-reviewed survival manual.
Exactly. It's the repository of all the knowledge you've accumulated. Which berry is safe, which trail is death, which species ignores fire, and which one respects the dark. If that history is flawed, if the transmission is imperfect, the whole group is gone.
That puts this immense, almost religious pressure on the accuracy of knowledge transmission.
And it creates a unique social hierarchy. The oldest, most experienced observers, the ones who hold the full, verified database of survival behavior, they are infinitely more valuable than the strongest warrior or the most charismatic leader. Their institutional memory is the infrastructure of the settlement.
So wisdom isn't just respected, it's the most critical resource you have, and you guard it fiercely. Okay, so humanity has somehow survived the early stages. We're using fire, extreme caution, and this highly refined, data-driven intelligence. But how do we build something sustainable? How does civilization even emerge when the very ground you walk on is actively hostile to any visible, settled life?
You run immediately into the great logistical wall. Agriculture, the whole concept of open field farming, which let our population densities explode and was the bedrock of our civilization, it would be nearly impossible.
It's not just a pest problem. You're dealing with megafauna grazing pressure. I mean, you spend all year growing grain, and a single medium-sized Triceratops ancestor or a small herd of ornithischians just clears your entire field in minutes.
And flattens your entire perimeter in the process.
Right.
The sources suggest that agricultural solutions would have to be radical and just fundamentally defensive. Farming would evolve largely underground, maybe inside vast natural cave systems where massive creatures just can't reach.
Or on those precarious man-made cliffside terraces, places that are inaccessible to anything walking on the ground.
Exactly.
Underground agriculture is a fascinating challenge, though. It implies they'd have to master specialized farming techniques really early on.
Are we talking about some kind of early hydroponics using geothermal light, or what? Fungi?
Most likely fungi, initially. Cultivating specialized high-calorie fungi or maybe even insects that thrive in dark, humid environments would be necessary. That, alongside highly sheltered small plots of traditional crops using, meticulously filtered light, this focus would demand an early understanding of soil chemistry and microecology far beyond what our Neolithic ancestors had. So the need for high-yield hidden food dictates everything. And what about domestication? On our planet, domesticating animals, cattle, pigs, sheep, that was key. It was stored wealth. But in a world where giants roam,
You just don't domesticate large animals when the ecosystem is dominated by creatures that see fences, even stone walls, as merely a suggestion of a boundary.
right, an inconvenience.
Exactly. If a small predator breaks in, you lose a few sheep. If a large bored sauropod decides your perimeter wall is an excellent place for an afternoon scratch, your whole settlement is compromised.
So the sources are clear on this. Domestication would be incredibly rare. It'd probably be limited to smaller, less visible, highly useful creatures, like specialized dogs for signaling, or very efficient small livestock that can thrive in confined hidden spaces, maybe even bred to be silent.
Yeah, the primary power source would just remain human muscle and knowledge.
And this all shapes architecture, right? Human settlements would have to prioritize blending in, camouflage, deep concealment over height or size or any kind of display. No wide plains, no sprawling cities stretching across the horizon.
That level of visibility is the ultimate invitation to disaster.
So instead of developing the pyramids or Mesopotamia ziggurats, they would develop settlements that look like organic extensions of the landscape, carved deep into rock, built into a dense forest canopy, or high up on elevations that large dinosaurs would struggle to navigate. They'd be designed to be systematically overlooked.
Think about the logistics. If your community needs timber, you don't clear-cut a forest. That's way too visible. You take only the inner, decaying, or fallen wood using specialized, quiet tools. You prioritize silent, low-energy movement in everything you do.
And the penalty for visibility isn't just losing your stuff, it's rapid, localized extinction. So controlling sensory output is paramount. Noise would be minimized, communication would have to be highly efficient and quiet, maybe relying on complex hand signals or specialized non-directional audio cues.
And light at night. It would have to be controlled with fanatical care. To attract attention with a flickering light in a world where massive, fast predators move in the dark, that is just inviting death. You want to be invisible, silent, and entirely unremarkable to the great forces moving around you.
This fear-driven necessity creates a really divergent path for technology. It would advance, but unevenly, responding directly to those specific survival pressures.
Toolmaking would naturally flourish early for concealed building, efficient food processing, and defense. But the need for better defenses suggests a big acceleration in one specific area. Metallurgy might emerge much faster than it did in our timeline.
Why metallurgy over, say, advanced ceramics or composite materials?
Because your defenses need to be stronger, harder, and able to withstand sudden, blunt trauma. You'd need harder, sharper points for spears, better axes for carving defensive structures into stone, and stronger materials to build secure gates or reinforcement systems that just might, withstand a mid-sized predator's charge.
So defense accelerates the study of metals, their tensile strength, their working properties.
Absolutely. You prioritize materials that can stop something huge, not materials that store data or generate power.
That makes sense. But while metallurgy accelerates, other things must suffer, like long-distance transportation and trade.
Right. Long-distance trade requires reliable roads, predictable routes, and large, visible movements of people and goods. In this world, roads invite movement, and predictable movement attracts predators. If you are predictable, you are vulnerable.
Why would you risk carrying precious metals across a continent when one misstep means losing all your resources and all your people?
Which means the massive globalized empires that defined our history, the Roman Empire, the Silk Road, the Age of Exploration, they just wouldn't exist. Or they'd be radically constrained to maybe coastal water routes or short, incredibly dangerous mountain passes.
The isolation effect would be profound. Cultures would develop in relative isolation, shaped radically by the immediate local dinosaur species they have to coexist with. This is maybe the most fascinating part of the divergence.
I think so.
So let's get into that. If every civilization is defined by its, ecological warden, what does that look like?
Okay, so consider two contrasting civilizations. One lives near a massive, slow-moving herd of armored herbivores, say ceratopsians or heavily armored sauropods. These creatures are predictable but dangerous just because of their scale. This culture might develop massive, stable, carved stone defensive structures. They'd focus on endurance, communal labor, and highly regimented patient planning.
Okay, that's one. What's the other?
Now, imagine a culture living in a dense jungle under the shadow of highly intelligent, swift apex predators, relatives of velociraptor, or maybe small tyrannosaurs. Their focus would be speed, stealth, camouflage, and exceptional individual skill. Their tech might favor lighter materials, poisonous darts, complex traps. They might even develop a unique social organization based on highly specialized roles, almost like an insect colony, just to ensure quiet efficiency.
So their architecture, their myths, their farming techniques, even their clothes and their language would all be dictated by the local dinosaur reality. It would create this immense cultural diversity, but a much smaller total human footprint. Just these scattered defensive pockets of intense specialization.
Okay, let's zoom out now and look at the planetary environment itself. We've established this is a more brutal world for humans, defined by constant threat. But our sources also describe it as being vastly more stable than our current world. And that's a powerful paradox.
It is the paradox of the dinosaurian ecosystem. Dinosaurs are incredibly energy intensive, they require immense resources, but they're also incredibly efficient at shaping and maintaining environments over huge timescales. This creates a state of deep, brutal stability.
It fundamentally changes the face of the planet. I mean, we can forget about the wide, sweeping grasslands that define so much of the modern world. They rely on mammal-driven grazing and fire ecology.
Correct. The dominant habitat would be thick, ancient forests that are constantly being pruned, fertilized, and remodeled by megafauna. The sheer metabolic needs and physical movement of these large creatures dictate the flow of nutrients and the shape of the vegetation in a very conservative, predictable way. Modern mammals, even elephants, they just don't have the scale to replicate that kind of regulatory effect.
And what about the original rulers of the night, the mammals that survived the Mesozoic?
Mammals would remain mostly small, fast, and nocturnal. They're stuck in their original evolutionary niche, unable to compete for daylight resources or larger environmental roles. And even humans, despite our intelligence, we would retain a lot of those prey-like instincts. Heightened awareness, rapid threat assessment, the constant need for communal defense.
And if they don't remain strictly nocturnal, they certainly don't own the day. Let's shift the tone here, because this is where that survival instinct becomes deeply psychological. We have to acknowledge the continuous generational stress. The night itself would just be terrifying.
Absolutely. The night wouldn't be scary because of superstition or a lack of light. It would be terrifying because many of those infrastructure-level forces we talked about are most active and hunting in the dark. Their massive size lets them move silently and efficiently when our visibility is at its lowest.
So how do humans cope with that? You can't operate in total darkness, but you can't afford to be out when the largest diurnal predators are active.
The human adaptation would strongly favor being crepuscular, active during dawn and dusk.
The twilight hours.
Yeah, that's the sweet spot. Visibility is available, which allows for some movement in tasks like collecting water or moving to defensive positions, but the massive, dominant diurnal and nocturnal predators are less active. They're transitioning their hunting territories.
That means all human activity is compressed into 2 small windows a day, and the rest of the time is just spent hidden, waiting, maintaining silent defense. That has to affect everything, from hunting to building to just interacting with each other.
And crucially, it affects rest. Sleep would be shallow, guarded, and strictly communal. You wouldn't sleep alone. You definitely wouldn't sleep deeply. You'd need instant high-speed alertness at all times. Imagine a society where no one has ever truly experienced deep, restorative REM sleep, free from the ambient noise of potential catastrophe.
That changes the wiring of the brain. Fear is no longer an emotion like anxiety that you treat or cope with. It's baked into the nervous system as essential clarity. It's a necessary high-speed information processing system that has to function perfectly for split-second decisions. What's the long-term psychological cost of that?
The sources suggest that humans in this world would develop extremely high baseline stress levels, but it wouldn't manifest as panic. It would manifest as hyperfocus. Creativity and long-term planning might suffer, but short-term tactical thinking and memory recall would be phenomenal. Their culture would probably evolve complex communal rituals to induce relaxation or sleep, maybe using specific sounds or drugs, but deep rest would remain a hard-won luxury, never a right.
And that clarity defines the physical and mental transformation over tens of thousands of years. Humans adapt to optimize survival in this intense, unrelenting world.
Physically, the sources suggest they would become shorter, more compact. This is purely tactical. Compact bodies are easier to conceal, they require less energy, and they offer better maneuverability in tight defensive spaces caves. Dense undergrowth, carved tunnels.
And they wouldn't evolve for explosive strength, but for exceptional endurance. The ability to flee silently and relentlessly when you're spotted, covering vast distances while carrying supplies, that becomes the physical ideal.
And the senses sharpen dramatically. Enhanced peripheral vision to spot movement from the side, which is crucial for a hidden sentry. Faster reflexes to respond to a surprise threat. They wouldn't be physically stronger than the dinosaurs, obviously. Their physical adaptation is designed entirely for evasion and defense, not conflict.
And the mental transformation is just as profound. Genius is completely redefined. Intelligence isn't abstract problem-solving anymore. It's situational mastery.
Genius means knowing the landscape intimately, knowing the specific species, knowing when to move, and most importantly, knowing precisely when and how to disappear. Pure, applied survival logic dominates everything.
So finally, let's circle back to that deep planetary balance. The Earth itself would feel older, more resistant to sudden shifts. You said dinosaurs anchor ecosystems over immense timescales. They provide a massive buffer.
That's the critical contrast to the brutality. Climate shifts, which have always been devastating to fragile ecosystems in our world, they would be buffered by this megafaunal regulation. Their massive scale stabilizes the environment by keeping vegetation cycles predictable and nutrient flows regulated across continents.
So if the climate warmed, the megafauna would adapt, and through their sheer mass, kind of resist radical vegetation changes, stabilizing the energy flow. You mentioned the biosphere would be less flexible. What does that mean?
It would be conservative. Extinctions would be rarer because the environment is so regulated, but when a species does go extinct in this stable, deeply conservative biosphere, it would be far more final. Evolution is negotiated slowly, requiring immense time and pressure to achieve a new balance. But loss is absolute because the niches are so tightly defined and guarded by the existing megafauna. After millennia of this crushing environmental and social pressure, the most profound shift happens not in their tech or their biology, but in their collective mindset. Humanity would completely abandon the idea of environmental dominance.
There'd be no illusion of control. I mean, how can you maintain the belief that you rule the planet when a creature larger than your entire building can appear without warning, forcing you to redesign your entire social structure just to stay alive?
And that philosophical shift is the decisive truth of this alternative world. Philosophy would evolve entirely around coexistence, not conquest. The whole concept of taming the planet would just never take root. Their survival depends on understanding the planet's existing rules, not rewriting them.
Instead, success is defined purely as endurance. Survival across generations matters infinitely more than expansion or growth or a global footprint. The highest virtue is permanence through perfect adaptation, not power through acquisition.
This fundamentally reorders human priorities, particularly in science. Science would emerge, but cautiously, and its goals would be purely applied survival, driven by necessity.
So understanding dinosaurs, their migration, their metabolism, their weaknesses, their social structures, the specific minerals they need to grow bone, that becomes the primary scientific pursuit. That's their Apollo program, biology, ecology, ethology. Those are the rock stars of their scientific world.
They have to be. Knowing the difference between two subspecies of a giant herbivore might save an entire settlement from migrating into a dangerous feeding ground. So ecology advances much faster than engineering, and biology advances much faster than physics.
Let's elaborate on that contrast. We spend vast resources on understanding particle physics and abstract math. Why would they lag so far behind?
Because the inner workings of an atom are irrelevant when a tyrannosaur ancestor is standing outside your cave. The immediate physical threat demands immediate physical knowledge. The resources and mental capacity required to develop abstract physics like building a large hadron collider or advanced telescopes, that would be seen as just reckless extravagance, a diversion of energy from essential life maintenance.
And what about the stars? The great abstract curiosity of our science that drives exploration and wonder.
Space exploration is profoundly unlikely. Why would you look upward when danger walks relentlessly on the land? The sky would feel irrelevant, maybe even symbolic of an unreachable freedom. Every resource, every cognitive effort is channeled into solving the immediate physical problem of silent, persistent survival on this specific planet.
And this philosophy of humility, it translates directly into their culture, their art, their mythology. Art would reflect restraint and tactical understanding.
There would be no romantic landscapes. You wouldn't paint sweeping vistas of an untouched, inviting wilderness. You'd paint topographical maps, warning signs, the perfect angle of a camouflage net, the profile of a dangerous beast to aid identification. Their art is functional, highly detailed, and probably often hidden.
And their mythology would be devoid of our concepts of conquest. We revere heroes like Gilgamesh or Hercules, who wrestled nature into submission and founded empires.
In this world, the greatest heroes would be the observers, the trackers, the interpreters of behavior. They're the quiet ones. They're the keepers of perfect, detailed memory, the cartographers of predictable movement.
They're the ones who could read the land, the air, the ultra-low frequency vibration of the ground well enough to keep everyone else alive for one more generation. Wisdom and stealth are the highest virtues, not strength or charisma. Their myths would be about a clan leader who perfectly predicted a shift in the watering schedule of a massive herd, saving the community from being trampled.
And this brings us to the final, decisive reality check. This world is sustainable, but only through relentless, intelligent caution. They survive by knowing their place.
They would be a civilization that has learned to thrive in the margins.
They would belong to the planet, never ruling it. They are not apex predators. They are not the appointed caretakers.
They are just another highly specialized species, one that is incredibly clever, incredibly fearful, and perfectly adapted to existing in the shadow of giants. #tag outro. So, we've charted a world where humanity still exists. This has been a deep dive into an alternate reality where we are just stripped of our defined arrogance, our sense of entitlement to the top of the food chain.
No global empires, because travel is too deadly. It favors localized, deep cultural specialization. No planet-sized footprint, because to expand is to invite disaster. And no illusion that intelligence automatically equals dominion over the ecosystem.
This world forces humans to grow wiser, prioritizing data, stealth, and communal memory over raw power or technological flash. We become smaller, not bigger. We become more patient, focused on intergenerational survival, not more powerful in the immediate sense.
It would be a tremendously harsher Earth than our own. A world where the margin for error is razor-thin and the cost of curiosity is often life itself. But in many ways, by forcing us into humility and perfect adaptation, it would also be a more honest one.
It's a planet that never forgot it was never meant for just one species.